I wanted to share with you something that Candace Parker recently had to say in an interview because I feel like it is relevant to what was going on in the Fever vs. Sun game.
Have you and Gino connected at all?
No. It's not beef, like it's just we don't like each other. We have to be in a place where people understand and respect that, right? Like I grew up in an era where if you wronged my brother, I didn't like you. Like it's just like that. Pat did not mess with Gino. So therefore, I didn't mess with him. It was a rivalry. And then it kind of boiled over into putting on the same USA jersey. So I just feel like we have to be okay in a society of being like, hey, I don't like you. You don't like me? Cool, like let's keep it moving.
And this is relevant in a sense to what happened between the Indiana Fever and the Connecticut Sun. At this point in time, you guys, it should be okay for us to say that it seems like Caitlin Clark and JC Sheldon don't like each other. There are just times in life, like Candace said here, that you just don't like one another. And I think that also spills over into the Sophie situation where she was sticking up for her teammates, I say that plurally, and she was sticking up for herself. And like Candace said here, you mess with my dog, I also don't like you. Gino messed with Pat Summitt, they didn't like one another. All of a sudden, Candace doesn't like Gino as well. A friendly, we don't like you beef, that kind of stuff is good for the game, and we should just leave it at that. With that, you guys, you can hear it in the video right here. The Indiana Fever fans were chanting, Sophie, Sophie.
And I have to ask, who's the player that you are excited to see next season, that you want to go toe-to-toe with?
If I had to pick somebody else on a different team,
I'm not going to let you say like Paige Beckers or anybody like that, even though.
Yeah, JC Sheldon from Ohio State, I'd probably go with her. She's a really good guard. She's really good, so I'm going to go her.
Fourth, and she hasn't shot the ball well. Scrambled. Tied up. Sheldon. Clark. Clark a little frustrated when she was on the ground. Sheldon was raking at the basketball. (80-67). Back to Iowa right after this. It's been a interesting game for Caitlin Clark. She broke the record right now, got a little tie-up with JC Sheldon.
Definitely the W, especially if Sophie Cunningham is going to continue to fight people for messing with Caitlin Clark, because it feels like Caitlin Clark is going to get treated in a certain way in this league for a long time. She's not a rookie anymore. Okay? She's already proved herself. She's won. And then there were some, ladies last night that were trying to go a little physical. And in last year, I think something we noticed, and I think a lot of people noticed, is when Caitlin would get bullied, nobody would do nothing.
That's right.
Nobody would do nothing. It was like, hey, they didn't know, like, whoa, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe people are doing this to Caitlin Clark. Teammates weren't jumping in there. They bring in Sophie Cunningham. I had no idea.
Play because she was standing on business. It wasn't a dirty play. It was an intentional foul, and it was meant to send a message. It turned into a scuffle, and I don't think anybody wanted that. But the way that the game went and how egregious the referees were and how they were not protecting players, and they especially weren't protecting the #1 player in this league, the biggest draw in this league, which is Caitlin Clark, and they continue to not do that. She's going to stand up for her teammate, and that's what she did in that moment.
I think that I have a huge passion for the game of basketball. I have a huge passion for women's leadership. And I think, I'm really excited to be entering into the WNBA commissioner role as a real platform for all of these players, the owners, the whole basketball ecosystem, quite frankly, to drive it, to the next level. Clearly, the biggest opportunities for the league are to enhance the fan experience, the player experience, for there to be a recognition of how important a time in women's leadership and the W's role in that. So this is just such a great time for everyone to rally around these WNBA players, attend the games, sponsor the WNBA, use it as part of your women's leadership platform. I think there's so much potential upside. I'm very excited.
In San Francisco tomorrow, you're on the Las Vegas Strip. What can the Las Vegas expect from Sophie?
Oh, you know what? I'm just gonna be me. I don't go in there trying to predetermine anything. I'm dialed in. I need to focus on hitting my shots, making sure I'm executing the schemes right. I'm not focused on the extracurricular activities. And you know what? During that, it was just part of the game. I think the refs had a lot to do with that. It was a build-up for a couple of years now of them just not protecting, the star player of the WNBA. And so at the end of the day, I'm going to protect my teammates. That's what I do. And I'm a team player, so.
We're obviously marketing around all of our players, but I think Caitlin's lifting everybody. Because our arenas are packed, our viewership. This is a key part of why I was hired, is to look at how to bring in new viewers, new fans, the demographic. We're one of the most diverse demographics in sports, both on the court and now our viewership.
Yeah. It rocks, by the way, when you're in the stadium. We went and loved it.
Think if this was LeBron in the NBA. Think if this was Steph Curry in the NBA. Do you really think that the NBA would be allowing certain players in the NBA to go after LeBron the way that Caitlyn was chucked to the ground? Do you think if another player came up, blindsided LeBron, chucked him to the ground after he had just been poked in the eye, that the NBA would be like, oh yeah, technicals, nobody's ejected, just a common technical foul? That would never it would never happen. And it's crazy that, it's not actually crazy, it's not surprising, unfortunately, because the referees have been horrible this entire time. But somebody else who called out the referees and has not been afraid to call out the referees is Coach Stephanie White.
The moment Sophie Cunningham filed a $2 million federal lawsuit against WNBA Commissioner Cathy Engelbert, the entire narrative shifted. What started as an on-court confrontation quickly escalated into a full-blown legal and media storm, one that rocked a league already facing intense public scrutiny. This wasn't just about a foul or a suspension. It was about accountability, image control, and a league that many fans believed had been turning a blind eye for far too long. And just when it seemed like Sophie Cunningham was controlling the public narrative, with fans rallying behind her and her merch selling out across the country, Cathy Engelbert finally made her move. Until now, Engelbert had stayed in the background, relying on league press statements to do the talking. But with support for Sophie growing louder, media painting her as the underdog, and questions about league leadership flooding social media, Engelbert knew staying silent was no longer an option. Al-leaked memos soon made headlines. In it, Engelbert made her position crystal clear. The WNBA would not be bullied by online outrage or manipulated by viral sympathy. According to insiders, Engelbert believed that discipline must remain consistent, and letting one player escape consequences due to popularity would set a dangerous precedent. But that memo was just the beginning. Days later, Engelbert stepped into the spotlight during a scheduled press event. Many expected generic remarks about officiating. Instead, Engelbert delivered a direct, unfiltered defense of the league's decision to suspend Cunningham. She made it known there would be no retraction, no apology, and certainly no backpedaling. Her words sent shockwaves through the basketball world. Engelbert stood firm. Player safety comes first. And while she didn't outright label Sophie's actions as dangerous, she made it clear retaliatory behavior, no matter the emotion behind it, cannot be tolerated. This wasn't just policy anymore. It was personal. Engelbert's calm but calculated remarks made one thing obvious. She didn't view the lawsuit as a noble fight for justice. She saw it as a direct threat to the WNBA's credibility, and she wasn't backing down. In follow-up interviews, Engelbert doubled down. She highlighted the league's internal review processes, saying every suspension and upgraded foul goes through a structured system meant to ensure fairness. But critics weren't buying it. They asked, if the system was so fair, why did it take a public uproar for the league to take action? Suddenly, it became a battle for the soul of the WNBA. On one side, Sophie Cunningham, the tough forward who stood up for her teammate in a chaotic moment. On the other, Cathy Engelbert, the commissioner fighting to maintain control and protect the league's image. Both believed they were right. Both had millions watching. Once praised for growing the WNBA's visibility and sponsorships, Engelbert now found herself in a divided spotlight. Some applauded her firmness, calling it leadership. Others slammed her as out of touch, more focused on on optics than fairness. But no matter which side fans chose, one thing was clear. Engelbert had entered the battlefield, and every word she spoke carried consequences. Meanwhile, Sophie's camp didn't sit quietly. Though Sophie herself stayed off the mic, her legal team released a fiery statement, claiming Engelbert's remarks only strengthened their case. They accused the commissioner of dismissing player concerns and trying to spin the narrative through press conferences instead of policy reform. Social media erupted. What once were highlight reels and fan edits of Sophie turned into hashtags demanding change. Some blamed Engelbert for dividing the league, others praised her as the only adult in a room full of emotion. TV analysts and former players joined the storm. Debate shows lit up with commentary, dissecting every word of Engelbert's memo and every clause of Sophie's legal claim. Behind the scenes, the WNBA was in panic mode. Emergency meetings were held. Sponsors began asking hard questions. TV networks demanded clarity. Team owners wanted reassurance. Fast. In response, Engelbert authorized a league-wide audit into officiating and disciplinary actions from the past 3 seasons. The official reason? Transparency. But many saw it for what it really was, an attempt to get ahead of the backlash and prove Sophie hadn't been unfairly targeted. Critics weren't impressed. They called it damage control, triggered by bad press, not genuine reform. When Engelbert was pressed about it again, she didn't flinch. No apologies, no softening. Instead, she leaned further in, reminding everyone that the rules don't change just because a moment goes viral. Her message? Emotion can never override enforcement. But in that firm stance, she may have missed the deeper reality. Fans weren't just watching a basketball moment. They saw Sophie Cunningham as a symbol, not of rebellion, but of standing up when no one else would. They saw her as the only one brave enough to stand up when everyone else stayed silent. And from that moment, a narrative war erupted, one that split not just fans and media, but even the players' union. Behind closed doors, the tension was growing. Some veteran players backed Commissioner Cathy Engelbert, warning that if emotional outbursts were excused just because a player was popular, the league's standards would crumble. But others rallied behind Sophie Cunningham, arguing that context matters and that standing up for your teammates is part of what holds a team and a locker room together. The league was now divided, and Engelbert was standing right at the heart of the storm. Still, Cathy showed no signs of wavering. Her office issued no retractions, no apologies, and no reconsideration of Sophie's suspension. But one thing was now undeniable. This wasn't just about a foul or a lawsuit anymore. This had become a full-blown leadership showdown, a high-stakes conflict between policy and people, between structure and influence. And it wasn't just playing out in courtrooms. It was unfolding on broadcasts, in boardrooms, through hashtags, and within locker rooms. The real question hanging over it all was Cathy Engelbert upholding order or ignoring the bigger picture? As pressure mounted and headlines exploded, Engelbert didn't back down. She doubled down. She called a full-scale press conference to address what she described as misleading portrayals of the WNBA's motives and actions. This wasn't just about Sophie anymore. It was about the league's values, its public image, and Engelbert's ability to lead when it mattered most. Facing the cameras, Engelbert delivered a composed but pointed statement. She spoke about professionalism, respect, and the importance of competitive integrity, but her central warning was crystal clear. Misinformation is dangerous. Though she never mentioned Sophie by name, there was no doubt who the message was meant for. Engelbert described the lawsuit as an unfortunate result of misunderstanding the league's disciplinary procedures. She emphasized that decisions like these aren't made lightly or in isolation. A formal process exists, involving video review, conduct committees, and multiple layers of evaluation. And according to her, that process justified the suspension. This wasn't about favoritism, she said. It was about drawing boundaries. Her delivery was polished, but to many, it felt cold. There was no recognition of how the moment had galvanized fans. No reference to Caitlin Clark's treatment. No sign of empathy for the community's frustration that had been building for weeks. The message was clear. The WNBA will not be swayed by emotion, no matter how viral or loud it becomes. And just like that, a second wave of backlash began. Former players lit up social social media, sharing stories of inconsistent discipline in their own careers. Some revealed how similar incidents had been completely ignored or punished without explanation. Many asked if fans and athletes overwhelmingly resonated with Sophie's actions. Why was the league leadership so dismissive? Even inside the Indiana Fever organization, frustration started bubbling. Publicly, the team echoed league support, but behind the scenes, insiders claimed tension was rising. Sophie Cunningham had quickly become one of the Fever's most visible stars, not just for her game, but for her cultural impact. Yet the team had to walk a tightrope, respecting league policy while watching one of their own become the center of a movement. A leaked internal email revealed just how tricky things had become. A senior executive praised Sophie's leadership and passion, while carefully distancing the team from her legal battle. It reflected what many inside the WNBA were feeling. This wasn't a black and white case. It was a storm of gray, and it felt like the league had no interest in acknowledging that nuance. But Sophie's legal team wasn't backing off either. As Engelbert stood firm, Cunningham's attorneys dropped an updated statement, complete with new evidence. It included multiple video compilations, highlighting moments when other players committed similar, or worse, fouls with no real punishment. One clip even showed a league favorite player making a near identical hit, and it was brushed off as just part of the game. Their message was sharp. Sophie wasn't punished for what she did. She was punished for who she was when she did it. Cunningham's lawyers argued that Engelbert's tone, timing, and refusal to address the case head-on revealed personal bias. They claimed the commissioner had already made up her mind long before any formal review even began. Worse, they accused Engelbert of turning the lawsuit into a PR war instead of pursuing honest dialogue and reform. And fans, they weren't done either. Support for Sophie kept growing. Her nickname was now on shirts worn courtside. Viral fan edits romanticized the infamous foul in slow motion, not as a violation, but as a symbol of courage. Sophie Cunningham was no longer just a player. She was becoming a movement, and that movement wasn't slowing down. Reporters who once focused on league parity and expansion were now chasing a new headline: has the WNBA lost touch with its players and fans? Columnists were no longer writing about stats or standings. Now it was all about locker room loyalty and the power dynamics gripping the WNBA. For a league that had long prided itself on unity, the cracks were beginning to show. Behind the scenes, multiple players raised quiet concerns to the Players Association. The questions were growing louder. If you speak out, will you be punished? If you defend a teammate, will it lead to lawsuits and media storms? There was a chill in the air. Not from the weather, but from the uncertainty. Meanwhile, Commissioner Cathy Engelbert kept to her routine. She showed up at games, held internal meetings, and spoke as little as possible publicly. But one move didn't go unnoticed. The league's legal team had prepared a formal motion to dismiss Sophie Cunningham's lawsuit, and this time, they were playing offense. Their counterclaim: Sophie had allegedly violated league protocol by escalating an already emotionally charged situation. Their case came with witness testimonies, referee statements, internal memos, all aimed at proving that her suspension wasn't personal, but procedural. Engelbert, insiders said, saw the lawsuit as an existential threat. To her, if public pressure could overturn a disciplinary decision, every future suspension would be questioned, and league control would slowly collapse. But in trying to defend the system, she overlooked something far more fragile: the trust of the people who keep that system alive. Fans weren't angry just because Sophie got suspended. They were angry because they'd been watching one of the sport's brightest stars, Caitlin Clark, take hit after hit, and the whistles stayed silent. Sophie's reaction was a response to that silence, and Engelbert's cold, calculated rebuttal, no matter how by the book, felt like just another slap in the face. The media storm wasn't slowing. Talk shows turned into battlegrounds. Podcasts launched multi-part deep dives. Former coaches gave long-winded interviews asking, what does leadership mean in moments like this? And one powerful moment began circulating again. A silent clip from the day it all started. Sophie standing over her fallen teammate, shouting at the refs, pointing to the hardwood where Caitlin Clark had just been knocked down. There was no audio, but the body language said everything. It wasn't about aggression, it was about protection. That very still image, frozen in time, became a central piece of evidence in Sophie's lawsuit. Her legal team claimed it captured her intent, not to harm, but to stand in solidarity. And by ignoring that nuance, they argued the league had failed both its players and its fans. Engelbert Engelbert's side responded with precision. Detailed filings, technical infractions, every missed protocol, every policy violation, but for all the legal firepower, they couldn't match the emotion in that image. The league kept moving, games continued, fans showed up, but the energy had shifted. Now, every hard foul came with whispers, every missed call sparked outrage, and every move Sophie made was under a microscope, yet she never spoke out. No interviews, no social media posts, just highlight reels, practice clips, and silent walks into arenas wearing the same jersey that had outsold every other name in the league for weeks. Her silence became part of the story. On one side, Cathy Engelbert standing by the rule book. On the other, Sophie Cunningham standing by her team. Two leaders, two visions, neither backing down, and as time passed, it became clear this wasn't just a viral moment. This was a reckoning, a battle not just between player and commissioner, but between the cold mechanics of policy and the raw fire of loyalty. The rulebook may be written in ink, but its meaning is tested in every game, every foul, every emotional decision in the heat of the moment. And this moment wasn't over. The tension between Sophie and Engelbert now lived at the heart of every WNBA conversation. This wasn't just about a foul, not anymore. It had become the defining story of the season, reshaping how fans viewed leadership, unity, and the fragile trust between authority and action. While legal filings moved quietly behind closed doors, the public narrative only got louder. Sophie still didn't say a word, but every time she stepped on the court, her game spoke volumes. No outbursts, no bitterness, just focus, fire, and composure. And fans noticed. Every time she checked into a game, crowds erupted. On the road, supporters held up handmade signs, t-shirts with her face, and the words, "I've got your back." Sophie didn't engage. She didn't need to, because by now, she was the message. Sophie Cunningham didn't need to say a word. Her actions spoke volumes. You could see it in her hustle, her calm under pressure, and her ability to stay focused despite the noise. She wasn't seeking sympathy, she was just playing ball. Every possession was a statement. Every minute on the floor was proof she wasn't here to campaign, like she was here to compete. Meanwhile, Commissioner Cathy Engelbert continued to navigate the storm from behind the scenes. Her public appearances were brief and carefully managed. When asked about Sophie, her responses were robotic, circling back to league policy, player expectations, and the WNBA's commitment to discipline and order. For Engelbert, this wasn't personal. It was about preserving the league's long-term foundation. But as time dragged on, the public's perception was clearly shifting. Sophie Cunningham was no longer just a player who crossed the line. She had become a symbol, a face for what fans felt the WNBA had lost: heart, loyalty, and fearless leadership. This wasn't about breaking rules. This was about showing up when it mattered most. And that message began to echo far beyond social media. Sophie's merch kept selling out. Custom artwork of her defending Caitlin Clark showed up in arenas. Even sports commentators, once silent, began to shift their tone. They didn't directly criticize Engelbert, but their framing of Sophie's suspension told the story. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a bigger problem. Behind closed doors, a growing number of insiders started to say what fans were already thinking. Maybe this controversy was revealing something deeper. Maybe the WNBA was evolving, not just around rules and regulations, but around culture, emotion, and the powerful connection between players and fans. And in this new era, players like Sophie weren't troublemakers, they were trailblazers. Not everyone in league headquarters agreed. Some feared that giving too much weight to public opinion could break the system, that one bad call could spark another storm, that one suspension could become a national debate. To them, this was a threat to league stability, but to others, it was a long overdue reckoning. Sophie's legal team understood the divide. In a new filing, they laid it all out. They weren't claiming Sophie was flawless. They were saying she had been singled out. They pointed to case after case of selective punishment, star players getting leniency, while others like Sophie were hit hard without room for context. They weren't asking for the rules to change. They were asking for the rules to be applied fairly. And they challenged Engelbert directly, not as an enemy, but as a leader. True leadership, they said, isn't just about enforcing boundaries. It's about recognizing the people who live lived just beyond them. Engelbert didn't respond directly. Instead, her office released a vague memo about balancing discipline with development, a diplomatic gesture that failed to name Sophie, the lawsuit, or the growing wave of fan frustration. And by now, fans were done with statements. They wanted accountability. They were tired of the silence around officiating, tired of the disconnect between what they saw on the court and what they heard from the league. They didn't just want to hear about rules. They wanted to know why those rules were enforced so unevenly and who paid the price. Sophie once again let her play do the talking. Just weeks after the lawsuit made headlines, she delivered one of the best performances of her season. No drama, no taunting, no theatrics, just pure intensity, grit, and leadership. After the game, when asked about the lawsuit, her coach didn't touch legal matters, but he said one thing that echoed through the fan base. Sophie shows up, that's who she is, and we're lucky to have her. That moment went viral. Clips flooded social media. Support skyrocketed. The fans had spoken, and then they weren't letting go. As the regular season continued, media coverage only grew. Opinion pieces started questioning Commissioner Engelbert's silence. She had once been praised for stabilizing and elevating the league. Now, she was seen by many as out of touch. Critics said her unwillingness to address officiating issues and her rigid handling of the Cunningham controversy exposed a deeper flaw in leadership, one that couldn't keep pace with the emotion, energy, and intensity of today's WNBA. Engelbert kept pushing forward, promoting new sponsorships, expanding broadcast coverage, working on long-term league growth, but the focus kept returning to one player, one game, one moment. Because that moment, Sophie standing for her teammate, had sparked something that couldn't be undone. It reminded fans that sometimes doing the right thing comes with consequences. But it can also spark a movement, not planned, not corporate, just real people connecting with a player who refused to look the other way. And as more voices joined in, including retired legends and current stars, one truth became crystal clear. This wasn't just Sophie's fight anymore. It was everyone's. From pro athletes to celebrities, the momentum just kept growing. One thing became clear. This wasn't fading away. While the lawsuit remains tangled in court filings, reviews, and pretrial motions, the real verdict has already been delivered. Not in a courtroom, but in the hearts of fans. Sophie Cunningham is no longer just a basketball player. She's a symbol of what sports are supposed to represent: loyalty, courage, passion, protection. And as for Commissioner Cathy Engelbert, for all her order, her discipline, and her commitment to league structure, she's now facing a WNBA where those values speak louder than any rulebook ever could. In the final stretch of the season, one unforgettable moment captured everything. During a nationally televised game, a young fan stood up in the crowd with a handmade sign. It read, "Thanks for standing up, Sophie. You stood up for her, you stood up for all of us." The cameras found Sophie. She didn't wave. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She didn't have to, because by now, this wasn't about suspensions, fines, or legal battles. It was about what you choose to do when no one else is willing. It was about choosing principles over politics. It was about the exact moment when one act of defiance turned into something bigger than basketball. Yes, Sophie Cunningham was suspended. She was fined. And she might even lose in court, but to her fans, to her teammates, and to every person now proudly rocking her jersey, she's already won. And as for Cathy Engelbert, the commissioner who once responded with legal filings and PR strategies, she's now learning one simple truth, sometimes in the middle of a firestorm. The most powerful thing you can do isn't speak, it's listen.